Hey, it's Jay with 1791 Actual. Thanks for stopping by for another in our series of videos on setting up your Lee reloading dies. Today we're going to talk about the die that would go here in the set, and that's called a case mouth expansion or an expansion die. Now the expansion die is necessary, and I've got this one taken apart so that I can show you how everything works. And let's zoom on in there. So in order for a bullet to fit in our piece of brass that we're going to reload, we need to stretch that case mouth just a little bit. And not a whole lot, but it does have to be expanded because, as you'll see, after we fired it, we talked with the decapping and resizing die. We talked about how that brass kind of stretches and has to be returned to original size. Well, when you return it to original size, the bullet isn't really going to fit in there. And if you manage to set it on there and put it in your seating die and press it down, all you're going to do is wrinkle the brass. And you don't want to do that because then it's not going to fit in the chamber. So we need to expand that case mouth just enough that that bullet will partially seat down into there, and roughly about that deep, just enough so that when it's sitting in the shell holder, and if I grab it like it's in a shell holder, you set the bullet on there, and as the ram moves, your bullet will fall off. You don't want that to happen. So you have a expansion die. The expansion die, you'll notice the brass pops right on up in there. Because it's not doing any further resizing or anything like that. However, inside this die is this collar, which is chamfered on the end so that it just barely fits in the edge of that rim. And when this gets pressed up against here, it's going to press it gently down inside and stretch that case mouth just enough that the bullet will actually sit in the top of it. I've got one here that I did for demonstration purposes, and you can see this one, it actually sits in there well enough that I can hold it horizontally and it doesn't fall out. And it's just enough. It's not actually stretching it much, but it's just enough that when I put it in my seating die, it's going to be able to slide it down in where it needs to be. So how does it do that? Well, this collar goes in there, and then you put this cap on, which holds it. It gives it a stopping point. You can hear it rattle in there. So now, when I put my case up in there, it doesn't go all the way in because now it's touching the end. It's not touching anything on the sides, but it's touching the end of that collar. And as the ram presses that in, it'll start to stretch that case mouth. Now Lee does their expansion die. It's what they call a powder through expansion die. Why is it powder through? Because there's a hole down the middle of it. And you could actually do your case mouth expansion, take your powder, the Lee funnel fits right in the top of here. And you can either use the funnel or not. If you're using a powder pan, you dump it through the funnel, or you can just pour it straight into here. And your powder will fall on down into your case. I tend to not do that because I get shaky sometimes, and I have had instances where I'll do my case mouth expansion, I'll meter my powder, drop it down, and this is, by the way, this is highly polished aluminum, so your powder's not going to stick to it at all. But I'll drop my powder in, lower the ram, and go to take the case out and have it slip out of my fingers, and now I've dropped powder. So my personal method is I do my case mouth expansion, take the brass out, set it over in my loading tray, and at that point it's ready to accept the powder. And then the step after that is where I'll seat my bullet. So let's flip over here to the press, and let's take a look at setting this guy up. And let me get my case that needs expanded. That's this one. We'll zoom in a little bit here. Put my case in. Now, in this particular instance, unlike the decapping and resizing die, where, remember, we bring the ram up and bring the die down until it touches the shell holder. Well, we don't do that with this one. In this case, we're going to put our case in the shell holder, bring this up. Now we start to lower our die. And at that point, I can feel resistance. I can feel that it's touching. Now, it's not touching, the die isn't touching the top of the case. The case is actually going up like we saw. The case is going up inside the die, and what it's contacting is that collar that's in there. So we snug that down against there, back it out, and I'm going to do 1, 2 half turns. That's one full turn. And this time, when I bring the ram up, I can actually feel that not only am I touching that, but I'm actually pressing on in to where it's actually starting to stretch the end of my case. So I want to test it. Okay, I'm still not there. He would like to kind of sit there, but not really. So I am going to give a quarter turn. At this point, when you first start to feel it starting to make contact and stretch, you don't want to give too big a turns, because then you're going to end up having to go back and resize again. Okay, with that, it does sit, but it's really not quite where I want yet. It's a little bit too wobbly. So I'm going to give him another quarter turn. Yeah, the quarter turn might be enough. And it's still not quite there. Another quarter turn. And yes, after you familiarize yourself with your dies, you'll know pretty much how many turns you're going to need to give it. Kind of like that old Tootsie Pop commercial. You know, how many licks does it take to get to the middle of I think it was Tootsie Pop. Okay, and now I'm starting to get a little bit of resistance pulling it out. So it's almost there. Let me grab my glasses. Yeah, that's, like I said, I just wanted to see how that felt, and it's still not quite there. So we're going to go ahead and give it another quarter. Like I said, when you get after you've done it a few times, you'll start to get familiar with how many turns in it's going to take. And I don't lock these down. The Lee dies come with their jam nut has a rubber gasket in here, a little O-ring that is kind of makes it so that it's supposed to not be able to turn. Other manufacturers have different types of jam nuts with set screws in them. I only use that on one of my dies because it's a die that is set the same for all of my loadings. But for these, I reset my dies every time I start a loading session, and especially with 357 and 38 special, uh, they they can be a little bit finicky. So I'm going to give that like an eighth of a turn, and I'm there. I am now at a point where that bullet just starts in the top, just enough that it's not going to fall out. So when I go to put that in my seating die, it's just going to run it right on up in there. All right. So at this point, we'll flip back to the press. My die is still wobbly. So I'm going to bring my ram all the way up, and once it's in that position, it's good and tight again. So I grab my channel locks, I run my jam nut down, grab my channel locks, snug it, and it doesn't have to be what? It doesn't have to be King Kong tight. It's just enough that it's snug and it's not going to move, so that when I drop the ram, there it is. It's nice and solid, and I'm ready to run through my brass and do my case mouth expansions on everything that I'm getting ready to load. So there you have it, and there you are. Again, thanks for stopping by and for this segment in my series on setting up your reloading dies. And hope you learned something. If you did, hang around, come back for the next session, and please like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so that you get notified anytime new content goes up. And as always, God bless, and see you on the other side.